Okay, welcome back to part 2 of Wisdom and Womanhood. This is the second of 6 videos in this series. The first one was an introductory video, and if you haven't watched that already, you can go back and do that. It's just going to tell you a little bit about why I'm making these videos and who they're for, and it'll give you a brief overview of the content of each of the other videos. This video is going to focus on the topic of joy and how our biology lends itself to our obtaining the most joy if we understand it and make the proper use of it. And while you're watching this video, you should really think about what I'm saying, how it applies to you, how it could apply to you in the future, and you should write down any thoughts you might have. By the end, you should feel like your brain has gone through a bit of a workout, and most definitely like your heart has gone through some serious interrogation about what it is you want, what you think will bring you joy. Because if it doesn't, I can pretty much guarantee that you haven't gotten everything out of this presentation that you could. So I said in the introductory video that joy should be a target that we aim for. And if our definitions of joy don't agree, we're going to have a very difficult time reaching a common understanding of what that target is, much less have a discussion about how to obtain it. Joy is not the same as happiness or pleasure or contentment or satisfaction. So we're going to look at 2 definitions for joy from my favorite dictionary to use. These are from Noah Webster's 1828 dictionary. That's 1828 as in the year 1828. So these definitions are almost 200 years old. But the definitions are not so far off from our modern definitions as to be wrong. And I find them to be much richer and fuller and just generally more descriptive and consequently more useful than some of the definitions that we find in our modern dictionaries. That being said, it does use words that we don't frequently use in our modern everyday English, and sometimes it takes a little effort to really understand the definition. So when you look up words in this dictionary, you should think about what's lost in the modern definitions that we have and how that might affect your understanding of words and concepts. Let's take a look at these definitions for joy. The passion or emotion excited by the expectation or acquisition of good. Joy is a delight of the mind from consideration of the present or assured approaching possession of a good. So this might be a good place to stop and ask yourself some questions. Do you agree with the way joy is being defined here? What do you think will bring you joy and why? What are you doing to reach those things that you think will bring you joy? And what would you do if you found out that those things that you think will bring you joy actually won't? I want you to notice a couple of things about these 2 definitions, okay? First of all, joy is dependent upon things that are good. The word good is common to both definitions, and it's a critically important part of joy. Anything that is bad will never bring you joy. Joy is always based in what is good. Second, you can experience joy before you actually have the thing that is good, but you have to at least be on the path to obtaining it. We have these key words here, acquisition and present possession, and these indicate that you experience joy when you have that good thing, right? That definitely happens. But these other words, expectation and assured approaching possession, tell us that you can have joy even when you don't yet have the good thing. And this is the main reason why I didn't use words like happiness or pleasure. The definitions of those words indicated that you feel those emotions when you get something you want. But joy is different. You can experience joy when there's an assured approaching of the thing that is good. You have reasons to expect it because you're taking a course of action that will lead you to that good thing. And you might have to go through some pretty painful things to get there, but it's guaranteed because you have either done or you are doing the things that lead to that good thing. And so you feel joy. So I have this slide that you will see periodically. And on it, we're going to list some bullet points, little takeaways that I hope you get from this video. And this is the first one. Joy is dependent upon things that are good. And now we're going to leave the definitions for joy right there for a few minutes, and we're going to talk about misery, because I find that highlighting the definitions of 2 opposite words can bring a lot of clarity to both. So we have 2 definitions for misery also. The first definition, pretty easy enough to understand: great unhappiness, extreme pain of body or mind. And that's easily relatable because most of us have been unhappy at some time or another. And it's not too difficult to imagine what that unhappiness would look like if it extended into the realm of great. The second definition says, misery is really the fruit of vice. And fruit and vice are a couple of those words that are a little less common than they used to be. What do we mean when we say fruit? Are we talking about apples and oranges? No. We're really talking about effects or consequences. When someone plants a fruit tree, most of the time anyway, they aren't just planting it to have the tree all by itself. They want the end result. They want the fruit. And so when we say fruit in this sense, we mean the end result or the effect or consequence. Okay, so misery is the effect of what? Well, of vice, which means depravity or corruption of manners. And now we have a couple more words that we should probably define. 2 more quick definitions, okay? What does depravity mean? What does it mean to be depraved? Well, to be depraved means to be made bad or worse. And when we talk about manners, we're just talking about the way of performing or executing something. We're talking about our actions and how we act. So, if we plug these little sub-definitions into the original statement, we could say, misery is really the consequence of doing things in a way that is less than good. So we have these opposites, joy on one end and misery on the other. But more importantly, now we know what causes joy and misery. We know that joy is based in things that are good, and misery is based in things that are less than good. And now we have a scale. And whatever situation we're in, when we have a decision to make, we can think about all of our options and plot those options on this scale that goes from good down to some degree of less than good. But for any given situation, when you look at all of the options available to you, there's probably going to be one option out of all the others that is closest to the good side. What is that option? It's the best. It's the best that you know of. And that's the one you want to choose. You don't want to mess around with any of the options that are pretty good. You want to aim for what is best, because now that you've created these different levels of good, you know that the greatest degree of joy is only going to be found in doing what is best. And if you do anything less than what is best, well, you're going to end up with some degree of misery. If you choose something that's just a little bit less than what is best, you'll end up with a little bit of misery. But if you choose something that is far removed from what is best, you're going to end up with a lot of it. So that's takeaway number 2. The greatest degree of joy is found in doing what is best. Now, all of this sounds easy enough. You think about options, put them on a scale, pick the one that's best, and you're good to go, right? Well, yes and no. You definitely want to think through that process, but you need to remember that you're human, and what you think is good may or may not be what is actually good. You might incorrectly think something is good when it's actually bad, or you might incorrectly think something is bad when it's actually good. And because emotions are the product of how we perceive information, of how we think about things, it's totally possible to feel favorable about something that is bad, and it's totally possible to feel completely repulsed by something that is actually good. So how are you supposed to make good choices when you might be wrong about what's good? Well, we get a really big clue in the definition that said, joy is a delight of the mind. You need to think deeply, okay? The human mind is extraordinarily capable of thinking deeply, but most of the time we think about things at a very shallow level, and we assume that something must be good if we feel good about it. And that's a very backwards way of determining what is good. That would be like taking a multiple choice test and choosing your answers based on what you feel are the right answers without even reading through the questions, right? You're going to get a terrible test result if you do that. But the chances of you choosing the right answer are going to go way up when you take the time to think about it, right? The only way you're going to get the best test score is when you actually read through the questions and you pick what you think is the best answer, even if it's just a well thought out guess. Tests are just a way of measuring whether or not the answers that you think are right are actually the answers that are right. And life is like a test. It's one long series of multiple choice questions that measure whether or not the things that you think are good are actually good. And so you have to take the time to think deliberately, because decisions in life often have much more serious consequences, dramatic consequences, than questions on a test. And when life shows you that you've made a mistake, and it will, if you've made a mistake, it will show you, you will lose a measure of joy when you experience the regret that comes from choosing something you knew deep down inside wasn't the best option, or if you didn't even take the time to think about it in the first place. In life, to avoid the most misery, what you think is good and what is actually good need to align. That's what brings joy. So you want to carefully consider your options and choose what you sincerely think is best, based on reason, okay, and not feelings, so that it's more likely your decision is actually the right one. The pursuit of joy is, in many ways, a process of discovery, and you're bound to make mistakes along the way, because not only will you discover ways in which your perceptions of things are inaccurate, but you will also likely discover that the very best option wasn't even known to you when you made a decision. I mean, at any given moment, there are lots of things that you don't know about, and that's especially true when you're young. You know that saying, you don't know about what you don't know about? That's true. But when you choose what you honestly believe is best, you can still look back at some point and say, you know what? I did the best I knew how to do, and now I know better. And just being in that mindset facilitates improvement, because there's no ego to bruise. You're not going to try to justify your bad decision, and you will more easily incorporate the new information into your future decision-making. Experiencing lasting joy requires you to minimize the regret you will encounter as you make these discoveries. Regret steals joy. And so if you want a joy that endures, something that lasts when you find out that your answer wasn't actually what's best for whatever reason, you have to at least constantly strive for what is best. This phrase, a delight of the mind, it comes and it only stays when you give careful consideration to your choices and you choose what you honestly believe to be best. And that concept is takeaway number 3. Even though your perceptions might be inaccurate, giving careful consideration to your options and choosing what you honestly believe is best leads to lasting joy. Okay, so you have the ability to help create situations and circumstances in the lives of other people that will help them experience more joy. And you have the ability to feel emotions for other people. So consequently, there is the potential for unlimited joy when we pursue not only our own, but the joy of others around us. Most people start life with the desire to help others. You can ask children, what do you want to be when you grow up? And you'll get answers like, I want to be a scientist and help cure cancer, or I want to be a doctor and help save lives, or I want to be a policeman and help fight crime. Some answer like that, right? Where it's obvious that other people are the beneficiaries. But it's pretty typical for that desire to help others to fade as we try to do that. As you deeply care about others, you're going to rack up some experiences where they don't care in return. And you're going to be tempted to believe at some point that any sacrifice for someone else's joy, won't deliver an amount of joy for you that will be worth making the sacrifice in the first place. And you're really going to have to fight this tendency and care very deeply about others, no matter what comes back to you, because there will be people who receive joy from what you have to give. And if you don't keep at it, you'll never meet them and have the impact on them that you could have. When you live for yourself, the joy you feel is eventually going to hit a limit. You'll max out because the only person that you're considering is you. And once you hit that measure of joy, that's all you get. But when you live for other people, the joy you can experience is only limited to the number of people you can affect, and there's no limit to that. This is a very important aspect of joy that you should learn to intentionally incorporate into your pursuit. It's actually a very important part of determining what's best, because you'll live with regret if you don't. You'll get to a point in your life where you'll experience regret when you realize you could have done something more to just give people the opportunity to have more joy in their lives. And that is takeaway number 4. Joy is potentially unlimited when benefit is focused on others. Now, takeaway number 5 says, the most joy requires you to take part in the design early. And this word design is a word that is going to come up a lot in future videos. We're going to talk about that a lot. But right now, I would like to point out that design, when you design something, it means that you have a purpose in mind and you go about making a plan as to how you are going to accomplish that purpose, right? And if your purpose is joy and you want the most joy out of life, you're going to need to start taking part in that design early in your life. This is a takeaway that is obviously most applicable to a younger audience, but I hope that adults who may be watching teach this to young people in their lives. Life is complicated. It's full of many decisions with consequences that far exceed what you probably understand of them at the time that you need to make them. And not only that, but what's good in one situation may not be good in another. And sometimes you can't completely get rid of that something that seems bad in one situation because you will remove the opportunity for it to be good in another. And all of us have to learn how to negotiate all of that, okay? You have to contend with those realities. And in your relatively young life, you have not had to contend. Children, by and large, do not have to contend with reality. That's one of the reasons why young children experience joy so naturally, because most often they have adults in their lives who will contend with these things for them. Kids more easily experience joy for 2 main reasons. First of all, they're less aware of things that would bring them joy if they had them. And they're also less aware of things that would undermine their joy. But as they grow, children will discover that joy is less and less automatic. And adults should be the ones that facilitate that discovery by gradually teaching children about both the things that will bring them the most joy and about the things that will oppose that joy. In general, our society and culture have done a horrible job of teaching those things to young people. Young people, instead of being introduced to these things little by little, will get smacked in the face with many of the harsh realities of life all at once. In fact, we have so many young people that go through that experience that we've given it a name. We call it adulting. When I say that you should take part in the design, it means that hopefully you learn from other people who have gone before you, who have some wisdom to give you, so that you can make decisions based on the learning of other people instead of your own bad decision making. So while most of the decisions that provide joy through your adult life will occur at the onset of adulthood, when you're like the least prepared to make them, it doesn't mean that you should be anxious about the decisions that you're faced with. It just means that as soon as you realize you're responsible for the decisions you make, and consequently for the joy you will have in life, you need to start actively finding and pursuing things that are good. And the earlier you do that in your life, the more joy you can experience. And we talked earlier about how to determine what is good. And it turns out that Noah Webster back in 1828 gave us a couple of definitions for good that can help us do that. He said that good means completely or sufficiently perfect in its kind, having the physical qualities best adapted to its design and use, opposed to bad, imperfect, corrupted, or impaired. Did you notice the word design there? Some things, when you look to their design, are so obviously not suited for a particular use that it would be ridiculous and borderline criminal, actually, to use them in a certain way. For instance, you would never use a hammer to cut a loaf of bread. You would take out a bread knife, right? If you had a beautiful artisan loaf of bread, you would use a really good bread knife to cut it. You would never think to use a hammer. That would not be good. And likewise, if you want to find out what your purpose is, you need to look to your design. It's how you find out what is good about you. Here are some things that you will find in your design. You'll find an autonomic nervous system, something that keeps you alive. It regulates your blood pressure, your heart rate, your respiratory rate, your internal temperature, all sorts of fun little things that are designed to keep you here. You'll find your skeletal system, a muscular system. You'll find eyes, ears, mouth, nose. You've got a brain that thinks about things. You've got a mouth that allows you to talk and communicate. You can make gestures. You can solve problems, and you can imagine and create things. And all of these things give us a general indication of what human beings are meant to be, right? We're meant to be alive, number one. We're meant to move. We're meant to take in information from the world around us and think about it and be social and to solve problems and to invent things and come up with things that have never existed before. And these things are all great things that will likely help you in a variety of specific pursuits. Using all of these things, you can become a doctor or a dancer or an athlete or a banker or a secretary, all sorts of things. You might even have an affinity towards some certain thing that will make it easier to choose what your pursuit should be. But there's one aspect of your design that is missing from this list, and it's the one aspect of your design that defines you as a woman and whose proper use will lead you to become one very specific thing, and that is your reproductive system. Biologically, men and women are defined not by how they feel about themselves and not by how they identify, but by the physical features and reproductive organs that are present at birth and that when are fully developed, are fully mature, give them the ability to perform certain roles in the process of human reproduction. A woman's reproductive system is designed to bring her so much joy if she uses it fully and properly, and yet it is the one system that society teaches women to misuse or to not use at all. If you think about it, would you go through life with your eyes shut? Would you listen to somebody that said, you know what, shut your eyes and don't open them again until you're like 70 years old? And if you did that, don't you think that you would feel some massive regret once you opened your eyes at 70 years old? And yet we teach young women to put off having children many times until they're incapable of having children. The misuse of your reproductive system is something that society teaches. I mentioned how you would never use a hammer to cut a loaf of bread. A woman's uterus is intended to be a place to give life, but some people use it as a place to kill. Some people use their reproductive organs only as a means of personal pleasure. Why would you use the reproductive system strictly for self-gratification when it's so obviously intended to benefit other people? The reason why it's easy to convince women to not use this system the way it's meant to be used is the same reason why it has the potential to bring you more joy, and that's because it involves other people. And for this same reason, you need to be aware that there is a proper use of those things. When I say that you should use your reproductive system, you shouldn't assume that I mean to go out and be promiscuous, right? Any more than if I were to say you should use your eyes, that I mean you should go out and stare at the sun. There's a proper use. And in the best and most favorable circumstances, when you look at a woman's reproductive system, it becomes very apparent that the full and proper use of that system, if it does what it was designed to do, makes a woman a mother. Unfortunately, our modern society teaches us to ignore this about women. And so it might be shocking to hear, but the truth is that the fact that women are designed to be mothers is strongly supported by every piece of evidence we have around and within us. It's not just the reproductive system that indicates this. Actually, if you look at a woman's anatomy, her physical structure, if you look at the beauty she has and the ability to attract a mate, if you look at her physiology, how everything functions, if you look at the sociology, how a woman interacts with others, especially young children, neurologically, how she's designed to respond to things like a baby's cry, and emotionally, how she's designed to bond with her baby. All of these things tell us that a woman is designed to be a mother. In terms of physical design, a woman is very good. But there's another definition for good that we need to take into consideration. And that definition says, having the moral qualities best adapted to its design and use, or the qualities which God's law requires. Do you know what moral means? Moral means relating to the practice, manners or conduct of men as social beings in relation to each other, and with reference to right and wrong. In other words, our actions need to be determined using a system of laws that prescribe what is right and wrong based on the effect they have on other people and things. And this, I think, is where we've lost the goodness of womanhood. If we look at womanhood today in our society, are their physical qualities best adapted to the design and use? Yes, you can definitely say that the design is good. Can we say that the qualities of conduct found in women are good? No, I don't think we can say that. I just talked in a very general way about how society teaches women to misuse or to not use their womanhood in a proper way in relation to other people, and that really needs to change. Women need to exercise wisdom, which is the right use or exercise of knowledge, the choice of laudable, which means honorable or praiseworthy ends, and of the best means to accomplish them. You can't experience joy in anything that isn't good. And as a woman, you can't be good unless your actions are as good as your design. And you can't make your actions as good as your design unless you learn about aspects of your design, about your womanhood, and you make decisions according to your design. As a woman, you're only going to experience the most joy as you learn about your womanhood and you use that knowledge in exercising wisdom, making the best decisions that lead to joy. So in the next video, we're going to start learning about the differences between male and female biology. You're going to start learning about yourself. You're going to start acquiring that knowledge about your womanhood that will enable you to start making those good choices. So we'll see you in part 3.